Hello, everybody. I'm Zenith, and welcome back to Diving Into DuckTales, the show where Kat Macberrie, Doug Macberrie, and myself discuss each individual episode of the new DuckTales series. And we are on the second to last episode of the season, and dear God, I was not expecting, this is one of the last episodes of the season, but I was not expecting such a big episode, at this point in time. Normally, what they usually do is they pull out all the stops for the season finale, and the lead up maybe have, some interesting moments, but, never something to this scale, in my opinion, unless it directly leads into the finale. But here, oh my God, the stuff that we got this episode was simply fantastic. Oh my God. Kat, why don't you give us a brief summary of this gut punch of an episode? Actually, before I do that, how's it going, Kat?
I'm fine. I wasn't just, emotionally devastated. I didn't just have my heart ripped out of my chest. I'm fine. I can do this. Oh, God.
And, Mr. Doug, how's it going?
Hanging by a moment. Hanging by a moment.
You're fired again. But yeah, Kat, why don't you go over what's happening in this episode while we take a minute, because dear God, I need a minute.
Whew. Okay, I'll do my best. So things start off fairly straightforward. Scrooge, the nephews, Webby, and Mrs. Beakley are all going on a vacation to look for this legendary MacGuffin figure. Meanwhile, while they're there, the kids are continuing to do their research on the Spear of Selene. It turns out that Louie managed to sweet-talk Quackmaster into giving him some shredded material from the week they were born. So together, they put together the material, seeing if it will finally give them the clue they need to figuring out what the Spear of Selene is. Unfortunately, the biggest piece keeps flying out of their grasp, and they're trying to get it, all the while Scrooge accidentally crashes, I say crash, quotes, the plane on top of a tall peak of a mountain. And now it's all like this big sort of standoffish scenario where they're trying to figure out how to save themselves. Mrs. Beakley's trying to convince Scrooge to find a way for them to escape. The kids are trying to find a way to get that last piece of the puzzle, and we learned some shit that, dear God, it's gonna break your soul. It's gonna break your soul.
Oh God! First of all, I have to say I was very impressed with the fact that this episode manages to keep you on your toes for pretty much the entire episode, because the paper keeps getting blown around the sides of the room, and if they try to move in the plane, it shifts around. So the entire episode is very much a chase to see what will happen first. Will the plane fall, or will they get the piece of paper, or will they be stopped by the adults? And it's very much a kind of like the determination of Dewey to get this piece of paper kind of outstrips everything for him, because he wants to know. He wants to know what happened to Della Duck. And, I mean, I'm pretty sure by now everyone who's watching this show wants to know what's happened to Della Duck. Because at this point, this mystery has been building for quite a while.
Inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah, only 22 episodes.
It's just, this has been a year of anticipation and build-up of what is going on with this Della Duck mystery. And obviously there's quite a lot of tension, there's quite a lot of, back and forth of like, okay, the kid's working to, balance the plane to get things moving, and then all of a sudden, like, Dewey, when he's actually found out what he's trying to do, he just goes for it. Screw what's happening with the plane. He runs for the piece of paper. He goes for it, and the piece of paper flies out onto the wing of the plane, and it builds up to a point where he's outside on the wing of the plane, where Scrooge is there trying to get him down, and Scrooge keeps muttering, like, I'm not going to let this happen again. So there's all this tension and all this build up to, like, what happened in the past. But before we get into the details of it, I guess we should talk about the minor points in this episode. First of all, Darkwing Duck is brought up again.
Yeah, briefly.
Briefly, we have the in-flight movie for the plane, since apparently they installed they installed like a VHS tape player or something like that.
It's just like an old box TV hanging from a rope that just plays the end credits over and over again.
because they crashed because they crashed the plane, they're like, oh hey, we have this tape stuck in the player, and so it keeps playing the credits, like the jazzy credits theme of Darkwing Duck. And the funniest thing is, like, when Dewey goes out onto the wing of the plane, Launchpad is just like, Dewey, do you want me to, like, pause the movie just so you don't miss the last few minutes of the episode?
Yeah, there's also the fact that Mrs. Beakley actually joins them on one of their missions for once. Like,
yes.
Like, she did join them on the whole 22 case, although that was more involuntary than anything. But this is like the first time she goes of her own volition, and she finally realizes just how many dangerous situations Scrooge puts his family into.
Yeah, like, it's something that you would think that she would know by now, considering like how, like, the types of adventures that Scrooge finds himself on. But yeah, for the first time, like, she goes on her vacation. She takes all of her vacation days pretty much at once. How many did she have? Like, I think she had like
972 or something like that.
Yeah, and so she's just like, okay, well, we're using our vacation days now. And so she goes with them, which was supposed to be a tropical island vacation, and ends up, thanks to Scrooge's flying, being a battle to the death for, survival. And every single time they try to do something, they try to, get something from the Jeep, or, try to do something to help stabilize the plane, or it just goes wrong. And she keeps saying that Scrooge is putting them in more and more danger, even when what he's doing is, stuff that's always helped them out throughout their adventures. And a lot of it is Scrooge trying to justify the fact that, he's not putting anyone in danger. He's trying to do the right thing, and the kids are really getting in the way because they're trying to distract everyone so they can get the piece of paper.
Yeah. I gotta say, like, the whole first 20 minutes really is frustrating, because you always see that little piece of paper just out of reach. And of course, they do the typical trope of, of taking their sweet ass time and trying to, like, grab the paper or look at it. They even make fun of that fact where Dewey's like, finally, nothing can spoil this moment. It's the equivalent of what could possibly go wrong. And every time that happens, something bad happens. And I'm just like, damn it, Dewey, look at the fucking paper already.
God damn it, Dewey. Like, just look at it. Because we want to know. Everyone wants to know. But it's like, a lot of it is just, Scrooge is trying to save face, trying to make sure that everything's going right. And the nephews are interfering with that. Launchpad's being Launchpad. So for the most part, the first half, the first third, and
the
yeah,
first
for the
2/3.
The first 2/3 of the episode are pretty much just the tension building of, what is this piece of paper? How are they going to get out of this? What is going on? So when it finally builds up to the point where they're on the wing of the plane, and Scrooge and Dewey are out there, and they want to know what's going on. Dewey's just like, I'm only gonna get back in if you tell me what happened with Della Duck. So we finally get closure on this one plot point. It turns out that Della Duck loved them very, very much. She she wanted to give them everything they could, and when they were little chicks inside their eggs ready to hatch, she wanted to give them the stars. Like, she already had all this stuff from Adventures, but she wanted to find a way to showcase outer space to them. So she built a rocket ship that she called the Spear of Selene. Now, Donald said that this was too dangerous for them. Donald didn't want them to go up. He said, hey, we have kids, let's stop this. But Scrooge decided that it was a good idea to build the rocket anyway behind both of their backs to give as a present, because, Scrooge is like that. He's an adventurer. He wanted people to see outer space too. He didn't count on Della sneaking into the spaceship and going on her own voyage by herself through a cosmic thunderstorm, basically a meteor shower that they weren't sure that she would get through. They kept telling her to stop, go back, turn around, but nothing they said would deter her, so they had to navigate her through the storm. Unfortunately, the last piece of debris hit the rocket, and they're not sure what happened to her after that. Scrooge kept saying that, he regretted everything that happened, and that's how Donald and him had a falling out. Whew, a lot to unpack there. I think we can agree that pretty much all parties are in the wrong, except for maybe Donald.
Yeah, poor Donald. Like, I feel so bad for the guy, because even though he's always made out to be like this angry comedic character, he strangely in this version is like the voice of reason. And the worst part about that is, because he's the voice of reason, everybody keeps everything from him. Like, Scrooge lies to him, the boys lie to him, his sister lies to him. Like, I feel so bad for the guy. And then after they find out and they come back to the houseboat and he's all happy because, he fixed up the boat himself within a day. And then they are clearly mad, and they're probably mad at him too for not telling them about the Spear of Selene. It's just like, Jesus, cut the guy a break. Like,
I know. I feel so bad for Donald.
Yeah, in terms of the guilty parties, after Scrooge reveals all this, the boys immediately blame him for everything, saying that it was his fault for building the rocket in the first place, it was his fault for not trying to talk Della back down, or make more of an effort to talk her back down, and for not making more of an effort to look for her. And he tries to defend himself, but he's being they're coming at him from all angles, and at the same time, that's when the plane finally starts to fall over. Symbolism.
The tipping point.
Yep. So, and you don't find out till later on, when everybody is just, had it with Scrooge, that you see what happened after Della disappeared. You see what he sacrificed and all the trouble he went through to find her and make amends for his mistake, and it is just heart-wrenching. That last those last 2 minutes or whatever, just, oh god, my heart.
I was crying. When we were watching the episode, I really started crying because he nearly bankrupted his company, sending people into space after her. He kept telling her to go back, but Della wouldn't listen. He did everything that he possibly could, except for not building the rocket. He built the rocket. He has that guilt. And it's clear that the entire reason that he was a bitter old man at the beginning of the series was because he blames Della on himself, and he doesn't want to have to deal with anyone else, because by having people who could potentially be put into harm's way, he could have another Della situation on his hands, which is why, when the boys wanted to go on missions initially, like he wanted them to stay at home. Like, there's all these things that really point to the fact that he is so eaten away by his own guilt and the fact that he couldn't find her and he lost all this money, that he wasn't about to risk doing that ever again. And then he got to the point where he almost had to risk his life he did have to risk his life to save Dewey here. Like, it's come to a head and everyone still blames him for something that he is so guilt-driven. Like, it breaks him. It like, he snaps back, he starts snapping at everyone, including Webby, but can you really blame him? Because no one is ever on Scrooge's side in this entire argument.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I can understand their anger and it being justified, but watching this multiple times, the more I watched it, the more I felt that all this really was Della's fault. Because, granted, Scrooge is definitely an enabler in all of this, because they obviously have the same, they share
thirst
the same
for
love.
adventure.
Yeah, the same thirst for adventure, like, to the point where it's almost an obsession, like, sort of like a drug. So, because, I mean, yes, he did build the rocket, but he wasn't going to give it to her until after it was out of the prototype stage and after, after the boys were born and they had settled in and, like, family life and everything. And what does she do? She finds the rocket on her own and decides to just take it without actually asking anybody, without, seeing if it had been tested or anything. She just, she had these 3 babies on the way and she totally disregarded them, all for the sake of having this one last adventure. Like, I'm sorry, but that is extremely selfish. I don't care that she wanted to find a way to, give them a way to go to outer space or whatever. Like, that is incredibly selfish. Like, it just kind of makes me mad thinking about it. Like, it's starting to make me think that Dewey was right to suspect that his mother was a bad person, because this kind of proves that she was. Like, she might have had good intentions, but she threw away a whole family life. She threw away the chance of of ever knowing her children, all for the sake of testing out an untested machine and going into the vast vacuum of space. Like, I don't know. It makes me mad. It really does. Because we have been reassured by Celine and by Storkules that, no, she actually was a good person and she loved and cared about everyone around her. Well, this doesn't exactly prove it now, does it?
Unless there's some sort of reason for this that we don't know. Like, part of me is wondering if there was something behind the scenes that we're not entirely sure about. Especially because, like, none of the other rockets returned, as far as we know. So, is there something, like, preventing their return? Is there some reason that they went up into space? Like, is there some reason for Della? The stuff that we're presented with does paint Della in a very bad light. And while I can agree with one small thing that, maybe she wanted to do one last thing before she had to settle down for, like, a long time without ever doing adventures again. Because we have seen in the past that she loves adventuring so much that she would even go to stealing Donald's hat, a small prank. She went to all these lengths to turn it into an adventure. She loves adventure that much, so I'm wondering if that has a factor to it, where she was so in love with the thrill of adventure, she wanted one final one for herself. Doesn't justify her decision, but I'm trying to justify it any way I can, and that's the best I can come up with. Doug, what do you think?
It's definitely a lot to take in. Yeah, I mean, One thing that really bugs me too is how I think it was Louis that accused Scrooge of being so cheap that he gave up the chase, and then yeah, you see that obviously Scrooge did sacrifice a lot. I mean, yeah, there is definitely that irresponsibility of Della on her part to just go without asking, and maybe at least she should have like left a note or something. Well,
Well,
no,
she
wait, she
did.
did. She did. What am I talking about?
doesn't make
I
it
took
any
the Spear of Selene. Sorry.
that doesn't make it any better though. That's the equivalent
No.
of leaving a text message that says I'm breaking up with you. Bye. Like,
Yeah.
you don't do that. Like, she said
No.
nothing to her brother. She left her uncle a note at best and just left without really telling anyone face to face and stole something on top of that. Like,
Yeah, and not to mention, like, she was having a heated argument with Donald right, in front of the eggs that would become Huey, Dewey, Louie, and it's like, wouldn't that be some sort of detractor from, going on this level of irresponsibility? You have kids on the way, you should be more concerned about safety. But no, you're just like such a thrill seeker that you're, too blinded by your ambition.
part of me wonders if it's probably better off that she didn't raise the kids, because God knows what would have happened to them if she had been like, if she had been brought them in her plane and brought them on these extreme adventures and everything. Like, I hate to think what would have happened.
Another part of me wonders if Magica had something to do with this, and probably not, but my critical thinking part of my brain, to try to justify this, like, my only thought would be that she was possessed by Magica or something.
I would not rule it out.
I don't know. Like, now that we've learned all this, I really don't see that being it, because we see evidence that this is a family trait. Like, Scrooge, Della, and Dewey all have the same folly in that they are so obsessed and so thrill-seeking that they take it to the point where they will put their lives and the lives of others in danger just to achieve it. Like, this is an ongoing family inherited trait, and it's not a good one either. So I believe that Della indeed did all this of her own volition. Like, I totally believe that. I really think that saying that, oh, she was brainwashed or something, is just a cheap cop-out. Because parents can be this selfish. They have been selfish, like, to a very extreme point. And honestly, I think it's better this way because it's realistic when you think about it. And it sucks, don't get me wrong, but honestly, given all the evidence we've seen, because even Scrooge, like, after he went through all that with Della and he stayed away from his family for 10 years and stuff, when the boys finally came back into his life, what does he do? He goes right back to thrill-seeking adventure. And how many times has he endangered their lives so far? And what happened in this episode where he almost got them all killed because he couldn't put aside his pride in the fact that he's Scrooge McDuck and he can do anything? It was the same mentality his mother had. She's Della Duck. She can fly through anything. And look what happened. Like, this is a thing. So,
To be fair, when the nephews first arrive at Scrooge's place, he is really reluctant, and he's kind of like keeping them at a distance. It's not until like they go snooping around and release that dragon that it gives him any drive.
yeah, but then as soon as he realizes, oh, hey, you guys can actually be fun to hang out with. Let's go on our first mission together. I know. Let's go to the lost undersea world of Atlantis as our first journey, while my sworn enemy is tailing us along. Yeah, that's a good thing to do with 10-year-old children on their first outing.
To be fair, he did not know that Glomgold was coming.
I know, but still.
Yeah, like the.
One thing I do also want to know. So first off, I want to say, in response to like you saying how the nephews were all very uh, thrill seeking to the point of putting their lives in danger. I think even like Huey, Dewey, and Webby all have their limits because obviously it was only Dewey that went out on the wing of the plane. They were all like telling him, stop it, it's not worth it. But
To
yeah,
a
no,
degree, yes. I mean, obviously, we see that Huey has put his life and the lives of other over like stupid little things like achieving a badge. And we've seen Webby, of course, with her having been shut up all her life, going to extremes to like, get that thrill-seeking adventure and doing stuff she's never wanted to before. But then you have Dewey, who just doesn't think through anything and just does things because he can. Like the pilot episode was like good evidence of that, with him just barreling ahead through this maze of like death traps, not caring whether he lived or died, and being disappointed when they didn't maim him to death or anything.
I think he was also trying to prove himself to Scrooge at that point. But that, yeah, I mean, let's face it also that, he and Scrooge are very similar in, their adventuring, that they're seeking adventure. I mean, hell, Scrooge is the only one that was willing to go out on, the wing of the plane to stop Dewey from getting it. And another thing I should also point out. So when he first starts his mission to find out about Della, and he talks to Webby, and she, says, "Oh, it's a bad idea. The last time, like, we even got mail. The mailman was like sent away. We never saw him again." One thing, and then like they're on the wing of the plane. Dewey just has the piece of paper, and he gets up the nerve to say, to Scrooge, "Tell me about the Spear of Selene," and it makes me wonder because Scrooge, talks back at Webby for her not being part of the family. But I have to wonder if from the start Dewey had just asked Scrooge himself, would he have refused to tell him? Because it is his mother.
At the same time, like, I do think at the beginning of the episode I would be leaning towards yes, but it's hard to say because at what point would they start asking? Because they only started really becoming a family unit as recent as the last few episodes. Like, yeah, there are a few points where he says, "Oh, you can ask me anything and I'll tell you," but part of me does wonder because Scrooge keeps all these secrets. There's a lot of stuff that he hasn't told them yet. And granted, he has a lot of arch enemies. It's a lot to tell. But at the same time, there's some stuff that even Webby doesn't know about. And I think part of me would think that Scrooge would want to keep just a little bit secret from them until they're older, until they could handle and understand the complexity of the situation just a little bit better, because this is not an easy situation. It's not something that has any real right answers or something that, something happened, everyone made mistakes except for Donald, but even Donald couldn't be there in time to help out. So, like, obviously, it's a complicated situation that the kids probably don't fully understand yet, and they're not ready to know.
Yeah, it's a hard call, because how do you really explain to a child that, oh, your mother's gone because she stole this spaceship, went on a thrill-seeking adventure at her own personal risk, and never came back? Like, that's kind of a hard thing to say. That kind of like you may as well just tell them, oh yeah, your mom just up and abandoned you, because that's kind of what she did when you think about it. Like, this whole thing could have been avoided if she didn't go in that spaceship. So, yeah. Like, and then, to say on top of that, oh yeah, and your uncle and your great uncle had something to do with it as well. And then trying to And then all the other stuff that went down, like, I can see this being a hard thing to understand for 10-year-olds. Like, some 10-year-olds are, like, smart enough where they maybe can understand it, but even so, like, you saw how the triplets reacted. They were angry right away and directed it entirely at Scrooge. And, yeah, it's unreasonable, but that's how kids their age react. So what do you expect?
So, yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that, and part of me wonders if Della and the rest of the spaceships are going to be found at some point in the series. I don't know, because at this point, everything's kind of regressed to where it was at the beginning of the season, in no small part to everything that's happened in this episode. And then there's something big that's going to happen in the next two-parter, and I'm just wondering, where does it go from here? Obviously, there's stuff that can be built from everything that's happened before, but I'm wondering, are they going to deal with Della right away? Is Magica going to be the central focus? Well, I mean, it feels like that's the way it's going to be going, but if that's the case, then how are they going to get everyone back together? How are they going to solve this? I don't know.
Well, I think it's clearly going to work in Magica's favor that Scrooge is all alone now, and that he's like regressed to his bitter, alienating ways. Because yeah, like I said, that's going to make Magica that much stronger and able to take advantage of him.
I have no idea where this is going. There may have been points in the past where I had an inkling, but even right now, just the way this ended, like, they perfectly built this episode to a specific conclusion to make us question what's going to happen next. This is the falling out point, and I do have to give them kudos to one simple fact. The liar revealed subplot in most, like, films or cartoons is usually not handled that well. Like, when the secret's revealed or liar's revealed, or, like, something like this is handled due to a falling out, it's usually mishandled to a point where, like, either you feel like they should get over it quicker or something like that, but every single thing that we've seen in this episode is justified, and I'm not sure how they're going to mend things after this point. And yeah, they had an entire year's worth of development, but compared to the bombshell that we just had, I'm not sure how they're going to get out of it. And with other villains looming on the horizon, Don Carnage is still out there. We still have all the other villains. Hell, Glomgold is still out there. Like, there's still things that...
And there always will be!
There are villains still out there waiting to attack, and I'm wondering if they're going to use this opportunity. Obviously, Magica, but what about, like, other people? What if Magica rallies some of the other villains together?
I think with this finale, it's gonna focus purely on Magica, because that's what this has been building to, is her regaining her body. That's what the whole thing been building to. I really don't see her going the route of assembling villains when she herself is still merely a shadow. Like, you want to get at full power before you start bringing along other people that, have a tendency to betray and destroy. So,
true.
Plus, I saw, like, the previews for next week's episode. So these next two episodes are definitely going to focus on the return of Magica, the enslavement of Lena, and possibly freeing her from Magica's influence. It'll be the others all, like... Well, of course, it'll be Donald and the nephews moving back to the marina, and, of course, Beakley and Webby, leaving as well. And I assume they're all going to come back together to help save Scrooge, because we know that Magica's going to come back and take the dime from him. Like, he's at his lowest point, so his defenses are going to be, pretty low. So I can definitely see, like, this is one of those things where people who had a falling out join together to defeat a mutual evil.
All I can say for right now is that I'm super excited, and that's the thing. Like, the way this episode ended, the last 5-10 minutes of this episode is some of the best television has to offer. They really pulled out the stops for this episode, and I'm just looking forward to see what they have in mind for the season finale. I am intrigued. I am emotionally drained. But yeah, this was definitely a good episode. Kat, what are your final thoughts?
Oh, this episode was fantastic, but again, emotionally devastating. Because I mean, I kind of expected this. Again, haven't seen clips from the trailer, but to feel it to this extreme, like, I never would have felt this in the old DuckTales. Like, they could never have reached this level. Like, I heard, like, one of the saddest parts of the original DuckTales was like this part of this 4-parter. But I watched it and I don't remember a damn thing about that episode. But this sticks out, like, completely. And it's so weird because the first 20 minutes could be just an episode on its own. But then they had to ump it to the 19th degree by adding in the revelation of what happened to Della, and that is what makes this memorable. And everybody in this was fantastic. Like, the voice actors really sell the emotion that they're all feeling. Like, you feel the hurt in their voices. Like, I was truly impressed, and the animation in this, like the way they frame everything, the way they show the flashbacks and all that, most of it are just still frames at that. It was brilliant. One thing I never noticed before too was the money bin. Like, it had never occurred to me until I saw the flashback that the money levels were that low. I always thought that the money bin was just bigger and the diving board was higher up, but no, that's the reason why, is because there used to be more money. So yeah, like, kudos to them for, like, explaining stuff that you don't think about before. And I do like the little tidbits they threw here and there, at the beginning when they're all excited to go to this expo, and they're like quoting the lines from the opening, like, race cars, lasers, aeroplanes. And then, of course, the whole thing that drives the plot is the Maltese MacGuffin. Ha 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 ha. Like, that was cute. And they even reference the first comic that Scrooge ever appeared in at the end, because when you see Scrooge sitting in his armchair looking all angry, that was the first frame you see of him in the comic he debuted in. So again, another nice callback. And like I said, the whole thing with Della in total is a callback to that Dutch comic about how she disappeared. So everybody was right about that. They definitely borrowed from that plot. What we didn't know was just, all the emotional complexity behind it. And it's just, oof. Yeah, this episode made me cry. This episode, it's definitely worth watching, but dear God, the feels.
And Mr. Doog, what do you think?
So first off, we kind of overlooked something, quite significant, although it's kind of, just brushed on a bit. Duckworth makes another appearance.
Oh,
Finally.
Yeah. And it's to leave the mansion.
So he can leave. It's like, they bring him back, he doesn't show up for several episodes, and then he just leaves. It's like, thanks a lot, Duckworth. It was totally worth bringing you back.
Like, part of me wonders if they couldn't get the voice actor. Part of me wonders if they just didn't know what to do with him. I don't know.
I mean, I felt like they should have just left his cameo at that and just had him, like, go back to, like, the afterlife or something. Like, because they practically didn't do anything with him, and I honestly don't expect them to do anything with him for the finale. I mean, if it does, cool, awesome, but yeah, now that I see what he's been up to, it's like, come on, you couldn't do anything better with that. Like, I know the voice actor does a lot of shit, but you could spare a few lines for him. Come on.
I also wanted to mention also that I noticed this on the second time watching. So they were, the nephews and Webby had set up like a little base of operations in that one big crate in the Sunchaser. And obviously it's got like the whole pictures posted to the wall with lines running down. And then when it gets exposed at the end, and you see Mrs. Beakley notice that, and then she immediately looks at Webby, but not necessarily at Webby, but she notices there's a piece of paper sticking out of her pants or blouse.
Right.
So it's like that's the first thing that you went for. It's just like I get that you would think immediately that that's Webby's work there, but instead you just notice this piece of paper sticking out of her pocket.
Well, she is a spy. She does notice stuff like that.
Oh, and by the way, technically this was caused by Launchpad, because when Mrs. Beakley was, pointing out all the problems with the Sunchaser, he decides to take Beakley on a tour, leaving Scrooge to be the one to pilot. And so that's like...
Yeah, we finally realized why Scrooge has a personal driver and pilot, because he can't drive or fly for shit.
It says something when Launchpad is a better driver pilot than him.
I also find it funny when they finally come loose of the mountain. It's very, very short. It's not even very high up. And he just pulls the controls up for a second. The plane flops down, and he's like, wait a second, that's not how it goes. And then the plane moves forward and crashes into a rock.
Much better.
To be fair, that mountain wasn't that far away from the ground. Wasn't that close to the ground. I think it was enough where if they had crashed, they would have died. But yeah, it is a lot closer than we thought it would be.
Never crashed a car inside a plane before.
I've crashed a car into a plane.
There was also a couple sequences that was very reminiscent of Uncharted, where a bunch of stuff were flying outside the back of the plane, and I'm just like, yeah, they were inspired by Uncharted in this sequence.
Oh, and on the subject of references, in the beginning, Mrs. Beakley puts on a pair of sunglasses and just chilling out, Maxon.
Chilling out, Maxon, relaxing, all cool.
No, shooting some b-ball outside the school.
There was a lot of good little references here and there. I did like the jokes. It's just that my mind right now is squarely on the ending of the episode. To be fair, when I started this podcast, all I could think about was that ending, and it's just the first 20 minutes or so of the episode are really great, but it's overshadowed by that last 15 minutes. They pulled a goddamn Ice King. They pulled a Gravity Falls. They just wow.
Yeah, and it's a shame because there was some nice little jokes here and there, but yeah, definitely the ending overshadowed everything else. Because, did you really expect it to go that route?
I didn't. I honestly, part of me was thinking, I know I was completely wrong, but part of me was speculating the entire time that Magica was the one that took care of Della Duck in some capacity, or that it had some involvement, or something like that, something with Lena. But I was wrong, but that was my speculation. I didn't expect space. No one expects space.
No one expects the Space Inquisition.
Anyway, Doug, back to your final thoughts.
Yeah, but overall, this was a very powerful episode. Obviously, it kind of meanders around in the beginning, until the very last part of it. So, it's not all grim and serious. I think obviously they wanted to make it fun so that you are kind of unexpecting of the just how serious the end was going to be, and of course how much of a down, or how much of a just shock to the system, and uh it definitely weighs heavy on you. Let's just put it that way, and it's probably best that they left all the humorous stuff more toward the beginning and the middle of the episode than at the end.
Yeah, bottom line, guys, the moral of this entire story: know when to bail. Steven Universe taught us anything, it's know when to bail.
Yeah, it's like a very similar situation, too.
Except in this case, they did not bail.
My final thoughts: this is a fantastic episode. The first 2/3 of this episode are great, but it's just that ending. That ending got me. Like, I was crying for a good 10 minutes afterwards, and I needed a minute. Like, I remember we finished watching the episode, I could barely speak. Like, I was just like, Kat, I'm gonna need a minute. Just give me a minute. I need to wipe my eyes. I need to my soul has been crushed. Give me a second. But it's like, it's such a good episode. There's so much involved in it, and the twist of Della is better than I could have predicted, honestly. Like, I like the way they went with this. I like how realistic I like how realistic it is, and I just feel like it's not an easy answer. It's not something that you can easily forgive, because all parties that were involved in it are at fault. And except for like Donald, but Donald opposed it, and he wasn't like involved in it. So it's just like, you can be mad at Della, you can be mad at Scrooge, but it's so complicated that like nobody, like, obviously Della lost her life as far as we know, and Scrooge lost nearly half his company's profits. Like, he lost everything, and what he did was wrong, but at the end of the day, like, it's not going to bring Della back. Like, guilting him is not going to bring Della back. And so, like, this situation is very complex. Not something that you would expect to see in a children's show, and I love that. I love that they're finally kid shows are treating kids with respect. This is something that you wouldn't expect a kid to be able to deal with, but even an adult wouldn't be able to deal with, like, the complexity at some point. So honestly, I love this. The rest of the episode's fantastic, but the ending got me so much. So perfectly done. A+.
True that. And next time, in our two-parter, hello, Scroogey, I've missed you.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy, this is going to be a big one, folks. Strap yourselves in. Whew.
Oh, boy. With all of that being said, I'm Zenith will rule.
I'm Kat Macberrie.
And I'm Doug Macberrie.
Wait a second. I thought you were Della Duck.
He's not
Della
in space.
Duck's in space.
Doug, get
And
out of
we will-
space.
Get out of space. And we will see you guys next time when we talk about Magica. Have a good one, guys. And just remember, if someone's floating into space, it's probably Doug, so you should probably shoot him down.
Inconspicuous whistling. Inconspicuous whistling.
But if there's a sensor bar over me, how is anybody even going to notice me in space?
Exactly. They'll look for the huge sensor bar.
Hey, this is Megami33. Thank you for watching Zenith Will Review. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. If you like what you see, check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/Zenith Will Review.